Hi, Vincent Hall, and welcome to another episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create. Last week, as you recall, we were working in color theory, and I did a monochromatic picture, here it is, of the sunflowers, all in tones of blue with some grays, blacks, and whites mixed in because neutrals are always our go-to freebies. This week, we're going to go a little more detailed into color theory and talk about the complementary colors and specifically a split complementary color schemed drawing. I know that sounds like a lot of terms, like, whoa, hold on, I don't even know about that. Complementary colors are pretty easy to understand, and I'll be showing you them on the color wheel shortly. Basically, it's the color across the color wheel, and that's its complement. So if you were wearing an all blue suit and you put on an orange tie, you just did a complementary color scheme in your wardrobe. It's the color across from each other on the color wheel. Split complementary is going to be using the two colors that are next to the color that's across from the other color on the color wheel. It'll make more sense when we look at it on my computer screen. But we're adding one other wrinkle, if you will, to this whole idea of split complementary, try to say that one 3 times fast, split complementary colors. We're going to be making a viewfinder. Viewfinders are simply some other kind of structure or implement that you can use to isolate what you want to draw from all the other stuff around it. It can be something as simple as a cutout shape from a piece of paper, or it could be the interior of a frame that you already have, a picture frame or something, or it can be as complex as all kinds of different cropping devices that maybe you have way back from the photo days if you ever had a darkroom. I'm going the simplest route, and I'm just using a sheet of scrap paper. I happen to have some black construction paper, white paper would work, computer paper, it doesn't matter. All I'm going to do is decide what I want to isolate from the picture around it. Now, to come up with ideas on what to draw or what to practice drawing, try looking around at things you have around the house. Maybe some old photos from travel times that maybe the photo didn't turn out great, but you like the idea of what it looked like, and we can make it better as a drawing than it even was as a photo. Or you can go the simple route of looking through calendars. My son-in-law comes from Ireland, so his parents send me calendars every year, which are beautiful. I love that donkey. But I decided to go with the other calendar, also from Ireland, and I'm going to work on these chickens. Specifically one chicken. I don't want to do both, although they make an interesting painting or drawing. I'm going to go for the portrait of the chicken. In order to make this easier for me to draw, I need to cut a shape that's going to isolate the chicken face and its background from all the other stuff. To make my drawing framing idea here, or what I'm going to use to isolate the drawing from everything else, almost like making a mask so that everything else is kind of blocked out, makes it easier to see what I want to do. I'm just going to cut on the fold roughly halfway in where I want this rectangle to go. So remember, you're doing half of what you think you want because it's folded, so it's really double in size. And when I open this, I have my rectangle. Yay! So I'm going to put this over my chicken portrait, and I'll show you how we can get started on transferring just the part of the drawing we want into an entire finished drawing. So once I have my viewfinder, I can play around with where I want to move this in order to maximize my chicken's portrait. And I'm going to tape that down with a little piece of tape and then transfer it to my drawing paper, which happens to not be a square, which is exactly opposite of what my viewfinder turned out to be. So how do you make a square in the middle of your piece of paper? Easy. Well, one, you could measure it all out with a ruler, and that's not a problem, but simplest solution is take anything that's a rectangle, here's a paper towel, and fold it in half, and now I have a square. So that's pretty easy. Anything you happen to have around the house that's a rectangle. It could be a piece of newspaper, it could be a magazine, and then all I'm going to do is take this rectangle and trace it onto my paper. So here's my piece of paper towel. And I'm just roughly creating a frame format. If you remember back a couple weeks ago, we used masking tape to make a frame, and that might be a good time to do this as well. I'm not going to do that for this one, but I do like how that looks, so feel free to do it. And you can barely see what I drew here, if at all. I can see it. I'll just make it a little darker so everyone can see. But keep it light, because that way if you do want to cut another frame around it or do something else, you'll have that option. So now all I'm going to do is place my viewfinder where I want it for my chicken portrait. And again, this is your own personal aesthetic, wherever you happen to want this viewfinder. I think I'm going to go here. Now, and then I'm just going to tape it down with a little piece of tape, not too hard because I don't want to damage the picture. Just want to hold this down so I can look at it. The key is if you have something looking in one direction, you want to give it more space where it's looking than where it's been. So I have a little more room on this side of the chicken than the other one, and not a whole lot, but I have some. I also have the other chicken back here, and I'm just going to pretend that's not there because I want to do a portrait of just this one. Okay, so to show you here, once we have our drawing area isolated from everything else around it, we're just going to try to sketch that in. Now, to do a chicken, all I'm going to do is break it down into basic shapes. Whatever you have can be broken down into basic shapes. Right here, this is just an oval. So I'm roughly going to draw the oval. See if I can get this here. I'll put this on top so you can see both. There we go. I'm going to draw the oval here about where I see the chicken's head. And again, I'm doing this very lightly. Then I see another oval coming out where the little part of his head is. And this thing looks like the letter U to me, where his tail is, her tail, excuse me. And we're going down. So you could say that looks nothing like a chicken, and you'd be right. But the next thing is to look at the comb. The comb is really triangles. So if all I do is draw my triangles to kind of fit around the area where I had that part of the little chicken's head, and I notice that it swoops down, and now the edge of this becomes the beak, you can see the chicken is starting to take shape. This is a fancy chicken. It's got all kinds of stuff sticking out here on the sides. And then we've got the, I think it's called the gobble. Somebody can correct me on that. Come down to the art center if you know. I did not grow up on a farm, but I'm just guessing. It's the part that hangs down off the chicken, and birds' eyes are on the side. So they're not like human eyes. We got to remember that. All animals have different eyes. So I'm roughly putting my chicken in here, and I've just blocked out a chicken face using basically an oval or an egg shape. I know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, in my drawing, the egg had to come first so I could create the chicken head from it. So it's the egg shape or the oval, and then a circle, some triangles, a U shape where I saw that little tail going up, and then another kind of pointy triangle for the beak. Other ovals, pretty simple. These are all basic shapes. Anyone can do this. If you want to see a master of drawing animals, especially farm life, you should check out Midge Holmes' work. It's fantastic, and she is just finished a chicken and drawing class on Wednesday. Might have been what motivated me to find this chicken here too. So ask her to see her work. It's really good, and she would love to share with you her techniques. Okay, so I've got the drawing of my chicken down in my square, but now what's this color theory thing all about that we were going to do, and how do I incorporate that into my chicken? Well, we're talking about split complementary, but before we get to split complementary, we have to get to complementary. And this chicken worked out perfectly for complementary because red and green are complements. So let's check out the color wheel and see what this split complementary thing is all about. The color wheel is made up of primary, secondary, and then what we call analogous colors, which are the colors next to each other on the color wheel. So we have our primary colors, red, blue, and yellow. When we do split complementary, we're going to be discussing the colors around the complements, but let's look at the complements first. If I have red and I go directly across from red, I have green. So red and green are complements. Same as blue, which is one of the primary colors, and orange. So blue going straight across to orange are complements, and violet, or purple as people like to call it, and yellow are complements. So to do our split complementary, I'm going to pick one color as my primary color for my drawing, and then the two that are opposite for everything else. Since the majority of my background of my chicken is green, I'm going to select green as my primary color, and then my split complementary color is going to be red, orange, and red, violet, because split complements are the ones between the complementary color. So green and red are complementary colors. I'm going to be using green, red, orange, and red, violet to make maybe a more Andy Warhol kind of chicken, if you will. But just to give you the complete sense of all the split complements, and if you Google this, you can find these at home too if you really want to follow along. But for example, split complementary is very popular and there's a lot of options. If you look over here where my arrow is to the bottom right, we have yellow, and their split complements would be blue, violet, red, violet. If I went to yellow, green, I could use violet and red. So you see what happens. If I go to these other values that aren't true green or true red or whatever, then I can use the actual primary colors as the split complementary. But basically, you don't even have to worry about that. You want to use a little cheat sheet. These colors are perfect to look at for that. Now notice also here's the grayscale. Gray values or grayscale values are your freebies, and you can mix these in as long as you want to in the picture to add some tints and some tones and some shades and all of those things. Just for fun, here's our old friend monochromatic from last week, and this is what we did with all these blues. We did the shade, the blue, and then the tint of blue, which was by adding white. We'll be talking about a lot of things that are on this screen as we go along through the next several weeks, because color is so exciting. And as a matter of fact, next week, just to give you a sneak preview, we're going down here to color meanings. I promise we get into the psychology of color, and next week is the week. I'm going to start out by working in my background, which were green. So I've selected a couple of different green color pencils. Remember, you can use one green and just use a black and a white, or even that complementary color red with the green to darken the greens. But I happen to have three. I'm also switching brands today. I know I've been talking a lot about Prismacolor, and I don't want to sound like I'm all one-sided, so I went to Derwent colored pencils, which I know a lot of folks in the art studio enjoy this brand as well. This particular one is called Inktense Derwent colored pencils, and they're supposed to be very vibrant once they're wet, and then you can work back over them with other media. So I'm really excited to try that out and see how it works, because I know a lot of painters are following along. And since we're trying to keep this simple for everyone in Vincent Hall that may not have painting materials, the painters are starting to feel left out, and I don't want that. So I'm going to show you that we can use these color pencils and then turn it into a painting when they get wet. Okay, let's get started. Since I'm looking at the chicken drawing and my background is darkest on this right-hand side, I'm going to use my darker green first and just kind of lay this color in. I'm going to go pretty quickly here since this is pretty dark all the way around. So if you're using colored pencil like this, you can just go any which one direction. Cross-hatching is always a good idea. We talked about that in one of the first drawing lessons, and that's simply going in a variety of directions. So first we go up and down, then we color going across. This is where I'm going to wish I used my masking tape, but that's okay. I'll just try to make it work without it. Going around, going the opposite direction. and getting in the dark green everywhere I see the dark green, which is pretty much most of the background, except for a few areas in this part here, which I'll address in a minute. So I'm just roughing this in. Since this is foliage, again, you could determine how dark you want to go, how light you want to go, or any of those things, but I'm just roughing this in as I see it in the picture. Let's see here, just to try to give it a basic sense of where we're going. It's key to talk to yourself again and see where you have the darkest darks and where you might have middle values or other tones. And what I'm noticing is the dark values are kind of framing this chicken and giving her a lot, almost said him, her a lot of different dimension. So I have that roughed in. Then I'm going to my medium or light green and getting in these lighter areas. Again, since my primary focus is going to be the chicken, I'm not too worried about making this look like much of anything. I'm just trying to get some basic tones down. There we go. And here's some lighter areas in here. And since these pencils promise me that they're going to turn into some vibrant color once they're wet, I'm going to take them at their word, which goes against my trust but verify mentality, and see that they do that. So I'm just coming in lighter here. Now this is where the second chicken was, and I'm eliminating that second chicken. So I am just doing whatever I feel like doing here just to kind of get the basic idea of some tones. The nice thing about this is you can go back over your lighter areas with your dark areas, and you can do the same thing in opposite and go over the dark with the light, which I think I'll do that too, just to blend this in. And I also have this olive green, so I'm going to add that where it's really dark. And that, when this was blended in, should give me my shadows in the background. It's key to get this background in so that I can make everything else kind of stand out as I go into my reds and oranges. Remember, since I'm doing split complementary, I might even interpret some of this white chicken as different colors and make it more of a psychedelic chicken, or a funky chicken, if you will. Yes, I had to go there. Any of you know that dance from way back? Well, not that far back, but I know that that is a very popular dance at a lot of wedding receptions, having photographed a lot of wedding receptions. So, all right, so there we are. I've blocked in most of my color from my color pencil. Now, here goes the experiment. Okay, don't fail me, Derwent. These are supposed to blend. Oh, look at this. If you get a chance to get these pencils, now I recommend doing it. They promised they would turn into something that resembled drawing inks. Drawing inks are extremely hard to control, I have found, but colored pencil gives you the opportunity to blend these in. And it said once they're dry, they're permanent. So that's the other thing. Be sure you know where you want this to go before you go there, because once it's there, you're not going to be able to go back in. Now, you could draw with this while it's wet too. Ink is a drawing medium as well, so you're definitely able to draw with the brush. I'm using just a basic watercolor brush. It's one of those El Cheapo brushes, as I like to call them, that I just picked up at Michael's a couple years back. And this is looking really cool. Now, this will also work with the barrel color pencils, as we found out, but probably not as dramatic. And I will post what the name of this pencil is again here, because this is something new to me too. I know they've been around a while. I just haven't used them for my own art. I'm primarily an oil painter, although this might make me change my tune a little bit, because this is a lot of fun. And I like how these are blending, and it's probably pretty easy for you to see what's happening here too. I can even use this to straighten out my line a little bit more and just go in here. Yeah, this is going to be fun. Now, the idea is once they're dry, you can go back over them with something else or even more of these colored pencils. So that's going to be the challenge. I want to see if I can get more detail using another brand of colored pencil, maybe my go-to Barrels. I'm just going to lighten some of this out just to get the background, but I'll add more detail to these leaves later. Again, if you want to draw with the brush, you can do that. You can see here I'm making tiny little lines kind of going in and out. Maybe I'm going to just give a little bit of a texture here because that is supposed to be feathers going on the chicken, and kind of come in a little bit here because chickens have feathers, so they're not 100% perfect in the regard of where their lines are. And what I mean, they are perfect, they're just not perfect as far as the texture of their feathers. Okay, so we got the background blocked in, and if you're a painter, of course, you could be using acrylic paint or watercolor, oil, whatever you're using. Oil pastel even wetted down would be fine too. So here we have this. Time to get started on the chicken. Okay, we have the background of the chicken, and what I'm going to do is just take my eraser and lighten up some of my pencil lines. Oops, well that's okay. It's still a little wet back there. Just so this is a little bit lighter and I don't have to worry so much about covering some of these pencil lines if I do decide to leave some of this white, because now I can basically see where I want to go with the chicken. Okay, so our complementary, split complementary means that I'm using a red orange and also a red violet, because those are the two that are on the side of the color wheel. So I'm going to start with my red orange, which would be red and orange colored pencils, because if you don't have those two separate, you're just going to cover one and then color the other. So I'm going to start with the comb, and I'm just using the orange. And I'm even going down here to this gobble thing and just lightly coloring this in, because I'm going to make this part more of the red violet, but I want to have a little bit of this peeking through on the underside. Okay, then I'm going over it with my red. So now I'll have a red orange, because the two of them together are going to give me that nice red orange split complementary color for this green, which is my background. And I'm just adding the same little bit of that color down here, because I'm going to add some of that red violet color in to make that really deep. But I also notice that there is the same color around the chicken's eyes here. Now, when you do split complementary, not everything is going to be exactly what you're looking at. So just like when we did monochromatic, you have to be judicious about how you're interpreting these colors. Remember, you do have the option of using your neutrals, so we can certainly do that. So I'm just going to lightly go over the beak. This is almost like a monochromatic kind of chicken here, going into here just to add some tones. And then I'm going to take that purple or red violet, and it just so happens these colored pencils do have a reddish violet, and I'm using that to create my really dark areas down here underneath the gobble, I think that's what it's called, of the chicken, and get that shaded in all the way down, and then use this to get this dark shadow. Chickens have a pretty intense look to them, so I'm trying to block all of that in more intensely. And then I can even take this to create the shadow on the comb, where there's a little more depth to the comb as it goes back and stuff, and it's not just 100% one color. There we go. Now, what do we do with all of this? Well, we have a couple of ideas. first we can take black, which is our complete neutral, and again, the freebie, and I think I'll color the eye in while I'm at it with the black. To make an eye work, by the way, you want to have a catch light. A catch light is basically this little white area, but that's way too big. That looks like the pupil is missing from the chicken. So, but if you just go around in a circle until you still just have a little bit of that white left, you've created a catch light. And now you can see that you have pretty much an eye that looks like an eye. The catch light's what brings animal drawings, people drawings, anything that happens to have an eye drawing to life. And again, since black, gray, and white are freebies, I can use this over these colors to further enhance the texture and the colors of what I have here. I can use it to draw the beak in, which goes much further back. And I can use white because yes, they do make a white pencil that's blendable to just add in this beak and get the beak a little bit lighter. But I'm not going yellow, which I know is the color of the beak, but I'm trying to keep this a little closer to what we were talking about. So if I go white in here, we're not going to see a lot of difference, but it is giving me some highlights. Not many, but some. So that's why it's important if you're using white paper, don't rely on this white color pencil. It may or may not do the job. Now what I'm going to do is interpret my chicken, all these shaded areas, because I'm doing split complementary, are going to be interpreted as oranges, not by this grayish color here. Because like I told you, it's going to be a little more of a pop art chicken than the reality of it. Although I am sure somewhere in the world there is a chicken in this color. And then where it's really white, I'm probably just going to leave it white. So we're going to imagine just the shading of this being these red-orange colors. There's my orange, here it is. And where it's lighter in here. And I'm not pressing hard. So if you notice with this chicken, I'm not going nearly as hard as I did on the background because I don't need it to be that, that toned. And I really think I do like how it's going to taper to white here. Maybe I'll add a few little squiggly lines just because I like adding those things into a drawing. But I'm not going to go full bore orange over the whole thing. Okay. Then lastly, we can take our purple color, that purple violet color is right here, and just add where I see my darkest shadows in this red, just going back into it because these are the complementary, split complementary colors, and this little gobble thing has a shadow under it. If I am wrong on what that's called, please come down to the Art Center and tell me what it really is. I should have looked that one up before I went on to a chicken drawing. Okay, then lastly, going back to my black again, because again, it's a freebie. I can add some shading along the side of the chicken here. This shape underneath, get a little shadow here. Define this area. You can draw with line. You don't have to just do shade, shade, shade. If you want to make a line, that's fine too. You can do that. I can emphasize this. I like making gestural lines on my drawings, so I'm just kind of going through here and zhuzhing it up with a little bit of line work. And see what we have here. I like some of the squiggly lines. There you go. So now we have our split complementary chicken. If I want to keep it like this, I can. I think I'm going to draw over this a little bit. But first, let's take a look at that color wheel again. So here's the color wheel that we've been using. And as you recall, I'm using green. And my split complements were red, orange, and red, violet. And those were the colors that I was using to make the chicken work as a split complementary drawing. I just wanted to remind you again where we were. So green. Here's my complement. So the split are the two colors on either side. So red, orange, and red, violet. So if you wanted yellow as your main color, you would use red violet and blue violet, not violet. So you want to kind of stay away from the actual complementary color and go to either side. Again, if you download a color wheel, and I also have one down in the Art Center, it's real easy to follow along. Okay, I decided to go ahead and use the water for this whole thing and then see what happens if I go back in with another medium, because I'm also experimenting with this particular brand of color pencil. And when they say Inktense, they mean it. It's pretty intense. So this is going to require you to clean off your brush a bunch of times. Whoa! And we have red chicken. And I'm just blending all this in. This is kind of interesting though. I can't wait to see what happens when it dries. And to make these feather areas here, see how I'm just pushing my brush? Almost like I'm cleaning my brush on my paper, so I didn't go back in and get more water or more pigment. I'm letting a little bit of dry brush almost just create a rough edge there. And then kind of coming in here. Again, this is really intense. So you might want to go to a smaller brush or leave some of these areas untouched. I don't think I'm going into the eye with this water. I think that might be a little too much of a good thing. And leaving some white areas could be interesting. Pull it around in here. And then again, if I barely have, I just blotted that off, just the lightest amount of water because I want to keep this beak pretty light. And be careful because your black color pencil is going to do the same thing that the other color pencils do, and that is totally blend themselves in. So I'm just going to keep that a little, leave that eye alone. I do not want to overdo it and have that fall in where I don't want it. Okay. But that, I like that. Okay, so I do like where the black kind of went in here a little bit around the edge of the chicken. And it's nice sometimes to blend your backgrounds to your foregrounds so you can see I'm kind of pulling the water in here so that the chicken doesn't look too outlined. But we're not done yet. After this is dry, we're going to try to see if these medium actually works the way as intended. And go ahead and put something else on top of it because this is a little too bright down here and I want to try to darken that up. So I'm going to let this dry and we'll be back. I gave my chicken a chance to dry. So let's see if these other mediums actually do blend as designed. So again, if you don't have that fancy Derwent Inktense, and I'll bring it up here so you can see the name Derwent, that's Inktense. If you don't have color pencils that blend with water, don't even worry about it. You can blend your color pencils just by using a Q-tip or a paper towel or a blender if you have it, or even an eraser if you just go light enough. So don't worry about having fancy supplies. I just thought it would be fun to try some of these new supplies that I've found and see if they might help give us a different technique or a different effect. It's also helpful for those of you that are painters because by using a brush, you're able to see how I'm manipulating the color in order to get the desired texture effect for our split complementary drawing, also known as my red-orange chicken. Let's see if these other things actually blend in and what we can do to finish our drawing. So I have brought in my faithful other brand of color pencils, the Barrel, and I also brought in my pastel because I want to see how this works as a mixed medium drawing. Those of you that are more advanced artists or veteran artists and are looking for another challenge, this might be it. So let's see what happens. First, I'm taking my Barrel yellow, which I know I said we're not using yellow because we're using red-orange, but since I already have that red-orange base, I'm going over the beak with this. See, it's still not yellow, it's more orange, but it's defining this more, and I'm also going to go over the comb with the yellow, and it's subtle, but I can color over this, and I'm getting a lot more definition of where I want my highlights to be. And there's going to be areas that I want even more, but as you see, I'm following along here. There were some areas that just got a little too dark. So I can use a different brand of colored pencil on top and help define this. Now, I'm not going to wet this color pencil, what I'm doing now. I just wanted to show you how this might work for blending. I think it's easiest to see when I'm using the yellow, because the yellow is turning this into that red orange. It's not yellow, and I don't want it to be. Then we have the little thing in the back here, coloring that in, and I'm just going where I needed to lighten this up a bit and also warm it up a bit, because when I added water to some of that red orange, it became more red than red orange. And remember, we also have the red violet too, so that's a nice mix. So here's the red on top of it, or the red orange, or rather, I'm sorry. This is the red orange in the barrel, and it really is coloring beautifully on top. So I'm able to really build up these areas where I wanted to get a little more intensity or even more texture. If I wanted to just make little lines and start to make this look more like feathers, I could do that. To simulate feathers or fur, it's pretty close to the same thing for this. We're just trying to add some little lines of texture. We're not trying to draw in every single little feather, but this is just giving it a little more oomph. Now in the background, I brought in my dark green color pencil from my other set because, as promised, I felt like this got a little too flat. And I just want to give this a little more sense of depth going through here where it got a little too light. And the beauty of this is, as I'm seeing, once I have this laid down with that one brand, that Inktense, I'm able to build up another layer altogether of this green, go around the areas with the precision of a pencil, but it kind of has the look of a painting, and rework some of these areas that just kind of got maybe a little muddled or aren't following along. If you're following here, you can see it's pretty dark up in here, and I did wash it out a little bit when I added the water to that first color pencil, so I'm going in here. Now, if I wanted to, I could add little leaves. I can get some really subtle details and just kind of move these around, but starting to call this whole process my 30-second art wonders, or 30-minute rather, art wonders, because it's taking me about 30 minutes per drawing, and normally I would take a lot longer for any of my work. So I like the challenge of working fast because it's forcing me to be a little looser, and that in the art world can be a very good thing indeed, especially if you start to get locked into one way of drawing or painting. Just kind of loosen up a little bit. What have you got to lose? It's not that bad. Then if I really want to go home and get some serious dark, I'm just bringing my black in here along this edge because there's some super dark areas that I like. And again, you could interpret this however you want. If you didn't want it to be that dark, then that's fine too. You don't have to make it that dark. But I'm just trying to emphasize the chicken and knock down this green just a little bit, and try to balance your dark. So if it's dark on one side, then maybe go dark on the other too. And I see how these dark areas here just kind of join a little bit, so it's not completely flat. And we had to re-envision what this would be without that other chicken friend next to this one. So I'm just kind of going through there. Okay. I feel like I have what I want here. Maybe come in here a little bit more and emphasize the shape of that beak. There we go. I think I have what I want as far as the chicken and the color, but I feel like I'm also not getting the white areas too much. So we'll see if the white color pencil works, and it does. And that's a good thing. So I can go back in and use white to get some more of my highlights where I wanted them. And then down here, I'm just gonna play around with that pastel in a minute, but we'll keep this true to what it was, and the white here on the edge of the beak, because that beak sticks out, and right along this side. And then if I wanted to, I can come in around the eye. Remember, I'm leaving that eye alone. Once you get the eye in, leave it alone. If you go and rework it too much, you'll not be happy with what happens. I have trial and error. I've made the error enough times, so I'm saving you the the time to have to do that. And then where I see secondary highlights on the chicken, I'm just coming in here a little bit. This was lighter, this is darker right here, but there is a nice light highlight coming here that I want to exploit a little bit more. And then this gets a little lighter on this side. If you go too light, which I just did, I'm gonna go lighter down here though. Blend these all together a minute. You can go back in and go back over it and make it not just so white. As a matter of fact, you can do an overlay of color where it's white anyway if you feel like it's too white. I want to see if pastel works on this too, because this is a first. So let's just see, and it really does. Oh, I like this a lot. Yes. Sorry, I get excited with art supplies, as most artists will. Like, our fun is going in an art store and just getting a sense of what's there, smelling the smells, testing things out. Well, before COVID, you could test things out and probably smell the smells too, because how much can you smell with a face mask on? But remember, white is a freebie in anything because it is a neutral. So, wow, I'm really liking this with the white. So if you're a pastel artist or would like to try pastel or chalk, even if you have some drawing chalks, this would be a good way to incorporate it over your colored pencil because it's really giving a beautiful finish to this. I think I'm gonna even add a little white pastel to the beak here just to give my chicken a little oomph. I'm gonna do some white on the edge of the comb here and then just dust it in. See, I'm just using my finger for this. I'm not going crazy with all the fancy blending tools. Fingers work fine. A lot of pastel artists, that's their go-to, and that works out pretty well for what we want to do. I'm just gonna go right around here and then dust that in, and I think we are done. Pretty fun. I hope you enjoyed getting a sense of what split complementary color theory is, which is pretty advanced stuff, but it's fun to learn new things. And also how to use a viewfinder to take a small area of a bigger picture and make it more manageable. Sometimes these things can be overwhelming. I can't draw two chickens like that, but maybe you can do one or just the portrait of a chicken, and that might be better than both whole chickens in the drawing that was originally there. And it could be anything. It could be a flower. It could be a bee inside of a flower. It could be a whole landscape. I mean, imagine the possibilities. I'll show you a few right now. So again, you can take any whole picture. For example, this landscape, which is beautiful as an entire landscape, but could also be a little overwhelming for most of us. And just simply take my viewfinder and block off a small part of it. So now these houses down here become a lot more manageable, and I can, the joy of flimsy materials, move this around until I get just the area I want and then work with it that way. So viewfinders are really helpful. Here's a whole running group of little baby lambs, but I can find the two that I like and just draw that. So it helps you to isolate other parts of the picture. And again, it doesn't damage anything. So you could cut a teeny one out and then enlarge some part of a photograph you might have, or even using it to look at a still life through the viewfinder and see what you can come up with that way. Then experiment with color. Today we did split complementary, which was simply using one color, and I used green, and then using the two colors right next to its complement. So I had red, orange, and red, purple, because those were next to the red and the purple. And that gave us our funky chicken, which I think is what I'm gonna title this one. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create. Next week, we'll be looking at the psychology of color and how to make color work for you to get the mood across that you would like in your art. Until next week, stay safe and be well, Vincent Hall. Come on down and see me in the Art Center every Tuesday and Wednesday, or if not, I'll see you virtually next week on another episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create.